So I think Kevin asked me to join this panel today because of my perspective. And my perspective, my daughter Molly said it just before lunch, over 40 years. As of Labor Day, just this past Labor Day, 46 years I've lived with LHON. So I think I have this dubious celebrity of being the guy with it the longest, and I'll put some numbers around that in a moment. But what I'd like to touch on today as a couple of themes are, number one, family. That word's, I haven't counted, but it's been mentioned many, many times. This room is full of families. The disease is about families, and it's also about teams. And I'm not talking about hockey teams. That's obviously a kind of team, but I'm talking about the team of your own family, the team that you might create at your school if you're at the stage of going to school, or in the workplace, or in other walks of life, and I'll touch on that at the end as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about family and themes, and I'm going to talk about hopefully giving you a bit of optimism, particularly if you're newly affected. In the last 24 hours, I've met at least a couple of people, Ethan and Jamie from Iowa, newly affected. So I'd like to give a little bit of optimism, a little bit of hope, and a little bit of encouragement, especially to people who are newly affected from my perspective, which is many years having been affected. So let's talk about those years. So I was 16 years old, roughly Mark's age, pretty common theme. It was 1972, and you're thinking, whoa, how old is this dude? I'm going to help you with the arithmetic. You take 2018 minus 1972, you add 16, you double it, you triple it, you add 3, 162 years old. Wait, sorry, 62.
I got a different number.
I carried an extra 1 there, sorry about that. So I am 62 years old. So 1972, I mentioned Labor Day. So, sounds like labor's hereditary optic neuropathy. I had just gotten a new job. I was 16 years old. I had gotten my driver's license at the beginning of August, and I got a new job just starting the school year working at a local swimming pool. And it's Labor Day weekend. I was going to get a lot of hours. It was an hourly wage. For you young people in the room, I think it was $1.30 an hour. So the key was you had to rack up a lot of hours, so I was ready to work all weekend. For my break times, I took a book with me, and I was, would take a break reading the book. By Sunday afternoon, I could not read the print anymore. I knew there was something going on. I had been under the care of an ophthalmologist since I was 7. I wore glasses, and they knew something was going on in one of my eyes, and over that Labor Day weekend, it presented in the other eye. So there I was going into 11th grade in high school, and it was really very, very sudden for me in the second eye. So we were in a quandary just starting the school year on Tuesday after Labor Day. What do we do about this to deal with schoolwork? And that's where this family and team first begins, I think, for me. So I have my family members here today, most of them. I have my 2 sisters, my brother-in-law, my wife, my daughter. My son, unfortunately, couldn't come today. But back in those years, my 2 sisters, my parents helped me by reading to me. So think about that. There wasn't a whole lot of technology back then. There certainly wasn't digital and electronic. The best we could do was magnifying glasses and a tape recorder, a cassette tape recorder. So my parents would read to me at night. They would read my homework to me, and that's how we worked our way through high school. And back then in Canada, some of the older folks will remember there was grade 13, so I had grade 11, 12, and 13 ahead of me. And in about grade 12, my dad said to me, "What are you thinking about for university?" I had not thought about it. I was struggling with high school and doing okay with high school, but I really hadn't thought much about university. So that expectation was there. The task of getting through undergraduate was daunting to me. How would I do that? The answer became a little clearer when I got to Wilfrid Laurier and realized it was informal, but there was a group, here's another team theme, a group of people who would volunteer to read into a tape recorder so that when I got home from classes, the work that I needed to do would be prepared for me on tape. So you learn to listen really well, and that's how I got through undergraduate at Wilfrid Laurier. And about the 3rd year I was there, my dad said to me, "What are you thinking about for graduate school?" There's another theme. And I was not thinking about it. But I did apply. I thought, well, okay, I've heard about a few blind lawyers out there, so that's something I think I'd be interested in. I was interviewed at a couple of different law schools because I think they really, there were a few blind lawyers, but they really they weren't sure how to handle it because, as you can imagine, you know, a stack of books, pretty high to get through with magnifying glasses and tape recorders. So I did get accepted at Queen's University, and there was a service, I don't know if it still exists, but it was at Trent University, and it was a service with a huge group of local volunteers. Some of them were retired lawyers and judges. Others were people who just wanted to help out, and I ended up buying 2 sets of books. One that I struggled through with magnifying glasses, the other I sent to Trent University, and all of the materials was read into were read into the tapes that were mailed to me, and that's how I worked my way through. The greatest thing I will say about law school at Queen's was that's where the very first day I met my wife, Mary. So we've been married 34 years, and that's the best part about law school. So I want to go back and just contrast, because it spans over quite a long period of time, just talk about some of the, briefly about some of the treatments, and this theme might be familiar to some people. The treatments included things like steroids, cortisone, prednisone, lumbar punctures, because they don't know if you have a brain tumor. Not fun. I had 3 or 4 of them, really not fun. And then various non-steroidal treatments, nothing, of course, effective. You know, again, we're talking late 1970s, early 1980s. The crowning one, and don't cringe too much, but the least fun, even less fun than a lumbar puncture, were the cortisone shots through the lower eyelid to the back of the eye. I had those once a month for about 2 years. Not fun. Nothing effective, and since the 1980s, no sorts of medication or other forms of treatment. Now remember, they guessed at the fact that I might have a disease called Leber's disease. There was no blood test for it back then, so we really didn't know. And as Mark said, I never met anybody else with it during that time. So feeling very alone. None of my family members, as far as I knew, were affected at that time. But I was under the care of my ophthalmologist, a neurologist, Dr. Raymond Bunsick at Hospital for Sick Children.
That's mine too.
Okay, and genetics clinic at Hospital for Sick Children. My doctor, who has since died, Dr. Hausler, he was at Toronto Western Hospital. He said to me, and this is part of the hope and encouragement, and it's becoming more of a reality, I think, today. He said to me, and this, I think, was maybe around 1980, he said, it's not going to be in my lifetime, but it'll be in your lifetime that something will be done about this. The field of genetics is moving very quickly. The thinking is changing very rapidly, and that was his view of the future. And I would say, hearing the doctors and the folks from the pharmaceutical companies today, this is becoming a reality. So very encouraging and good news for all of you in the room. So in 1993, the genetics clinic contacted me and said, there's now a test. It's done at the Emory Clinic in Atlanta. So we took a blood sample, and sure enough, came back as the 14484, like many people in the room. So that was good to know. There was nothing to do about it, of course, no treatment. I go on probably another 20 years after that to 2015. And that's where my daughter said to me, it was summer of 2015, and she said, Dad, I found, my daughter Molly, who you heard earlier, she said, Dad, there's this website out there, LHON.org, and they do a monthly phone call, a conference call. You can dial into it. You might be interested in that. So I did dial into it, and that's the first time, other than I have 2 cousins who are affected, a male cousin and a female cousin, who have since been affected at later ages. But I'd never met anybody or talked to anybody with LHON since 1972. And to me, on that first phone call, you've all heard this, we're all in the room kind of hearing this too, because this is the first Canadian meeting, hearing people with similar life experiences and laughing about some of the things that happened to them, and sharing stories. So it was really great. And then we attended the 2017 LHON conference in Alexandria, Virginia. And that's where I first met Mark and Kevin's family and a lot of people, and ended up here today. So wonderful, rapid transition in the last few years. Just to step back a little bit and talk a little bit about work life, and then I'll finish with my themes. But I did end up graduating from law school. I decided it wasn't for me. I ended up in the investment field. In 1996, ironically, we moved to Atlanta, and we lived there for many years, and then in 2010 moved to Connecticut. My work has been very rewarding. It's been one thing that has been part of it, because the firms I've worked with have investments in various other countries, in Asia and South America, Europe. I've had to travel, and that, I think, has taught me a number of lessons. So one of the things I'd like to leave you with is a couple of pieces of advice. Don't be stupid like I was. I kind of went through life trying to be stoic, do it myself, and I did a lot of things like that, maybe because I'm a little older now. The thing I would, and it is easier in today's world, people are much more open to helping, but ask for help. And Mark also touched on this. It is a two-way street. You will give back to the people that you ask for help. They will be, for the most part, willing to help you, and there are people out there in the world who you haven't even figured out yet who can be tremendously helpful to you, whether it's in work, your everyday life, whether you're traveling to another country, all of the above. The best thing I can tell you is put a smile on your face and ask for help, and things will work out, whether you're traveling, whether you're trying to get your job done, whether you're trying to get through school, whether you're just trying to get through the grocery store and out to the cash register. Don't hesitate to ask people for help. They will be happy to do so. Thank you.
Thank you.